بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. Inshallah, if you have any question, بإذن الله تعالى I will do the question.
From my understanding, anything that'll put you in a trance, say music,
No, the intoxicant would really have the effect of the mind. So, like, cause drunkenness, cause drowsiness. So that's the intoxication we're talking about. The intoxicant, like alcohol, like drugs. That's the intoxicant. That's what is haram. طيب, we'll continue inshallah ta'ala. I think we still have to see the usul of the Hanbali school, الإمام أحمد. قال: وأما الإمام أحمد بن حنبل رحمه الله تعالى فقواعد مذهبه شديدة القرب من قواعد مذهب الإمام الشافعي. They are very close in his principle, like the principle of the Shafi'i school. So it's like what we have already described. For your question about the hadith, sister, so the hadith of the Shafi'i, take the hadith sahih connected, not the mutawatir. So any hadith that is sahih connected to the Prophet. So one of the condition of the hadith sahih is to have a connected chain to the Prophet. So connected chain with the Prophet. Every narrator need to be قال عن صادق عن صادق عن صدق أو عدل إلى عدل إلى منتهى. And there's بدون انقطاع, there is no disconnect into the chain of narration. And the content of the hadith does not have any defect, علة, or shudud, any something that irregular. So, for example, the hadith will be talking of something strange. That will not be counted because the content of the hadith does not comply with the spirit of the Sharia. So these are some of the condition of the hadith al-sahih. So that's what the Imam al-Shafi'i. So he's saying, if I have that hadith, then I will not go farther. So that's why when you introduce the istihsan is kind, you're justifying a ruling in the presence of a hadith. So the principles of the Al-Imam Ahmad, first is the Quran, then the Sunnah. If you find the Imam Ahmad in the Sunnah evidence, he will not go farther. And he will not have, he does not advance on the hadith, authentic, sound hadith, any of the action of people of Medina. Because according to Al-Imam Malik, for example, the Maliki school, the action of people of Medina is enough evidence, is stronger than a hadith. Because for Imam Malik, who lived in Medina, to have this action, for example, specific action in Salah, this is how they do it. So he's seeing the transmission by the action is stronger than the transmission by the words. So when you say the action of people of Medina, not any people, you're talking about the teacher, the scholars, those are people of Medina who's been, taken that action being transmitted to them, they grow up with this action. So we understand Imam Malik because he is the Imam of Medina in the time, For Imam Ahmed, he said, I have a hadith which is, proven to be sahih. So that hadith for me is the evidence. I will not have the action of people of Medina to be advanced. So when someone is far, for example, from Medina, what does it mean, the action of people of Medina? It does not mean, it does not have a strength, and it does not have a strong, proof for them. It's not like Imam Malik who grew up and seeing this action as part of the habit of people of Medina. Imam Ahmed used to be in Baghdad, far from Medina. So you see, even the place where they reside, it has an impact on the way how they, build their procedure and their way of analysis. قال, and he will not, if he has hadith sahih, he will not take in consideration the action of people of Medina, or the opinion, or the qiyas, the analogy, or the saying of a companion, or the consensus. القائم على عدم العلم بالمخالف. The consensus, because I told you there is a different, definition of the ijma'. Which one that we are talking about. Second, if he does not find any text, from the Sunnah, then he passed to the verdict and the fatwa of the companion. As long as there is no an apparent other fatwa that conflict or oppose this opinion, he will take this opinion. And the fatwa of the Sahabi, he will stop there, he will not go further. Then the next, if he'll find Sahaba, they have different of opinion, he will choose the opinion that the closest to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah. And if he does not find anyone who closer, all of them are close, or all of them, they are kind of in the same level, so he mentioned all of them without, specifying which one is the most right or the most accurate. He put them all. Also, he'll take in consideration the hadith al-mursal, which is, the hadith that is, for example, al-mursal, that tabi'i says the Prophet ﷺ said. For example, Hassan al-Basri said, the Prophet ﷺ said. Hassan al-Basri is not a companion. So he said the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't hear the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't see the Prophet. So necessarily he get it from a Sahabi. But he didn't name the Sahabi, so we have a disconnect into the chain. So we call it Mursal. Al-Mursal is like he sent it, the saying, by narration, by passing or jumping over a Sahabi. So Al-Imam Malik, he take the Mursal from the big tabi'in, because they know the, for example, Imam like Al-Hassan al-Basri, he only says they believe because of his piety, because of his truthfulness. What he says is to, that he's confident from the Prophet ﷺ. Other scholars said, I have a disconnect, I will not take it, that's it. It depends, I'll take it as advice, but now here you need to understand that this hukum, it's a ruling that you're going to implement in your life, seeking with its implementation the pleasure of Allah. So it's very delicate and sensitive. So the scholars here, regarding this very sensitive issue, that they are very precautious. So when you say mursal, he said, I have a disconnect, I will not take it. The other one, he said, yes, but he is Imam so-and-so, so I trust this Imam. So Imam Ahmad, he'll take with the mursal if there is no other ahadith. And even he take with the da'if, the weak da'if, the weak hadith. The weak hadith, according to Imam Ahmad, does not mean that he's munkar, that is hadith that does not exist. Weak da'if, it like have weak percentage that the Prophet ﷺ said it. Does not mean that he didn't say it. And does not mean that he said it. We have a weak percentage that he said it. Now, when I have a weak hadith with a very weak percentage that the Prophet ﷺ said it, I don't have any other text. I don't have ijma'. I don't have any text that oppose this hadith. So why not this hadith give me the inspiration to make the law? So it does not tell you this is the evidence. He said there is a hadith da'if that help us to inspire to build the law related to this issue, for example. And this is the style of the principle, as we have mentioned, of Imam Ahmad in this case. Al-Qiyasu, according to Imam Ahmad, is like the last resort if there is none of what we have mentioned. So those are the main school of thought and their principle. And you can see that in their principle, already you can see the differences. So you have the differences in the availability of the text on one's hand, because none of them, they have all the ahadith. Like Imam Shafi'i has this beautiful famous saying. He said, none of the people can compile the sunnah, but the whole sunnah exists in the ummah. It rhymes. None can compile the whole sunnah. There's no one who has the whole sunnah in his hand. But the whole sunnah is within the ummah. So if you take, for example, the sunnah that has al-Bukhari, al-Muslim, al-Imam Ahmad, al-Imam Malik, and Abu Dawood, al-Nasa'i, and so on, you'll find them, compile them, Ibn Abi Shaybah, you'll find the whole sunnah. But none of them has the whole sunnah. So already here we have, the premises, if you can say, of the differences. Then you have the way of the interpretation, the way how you approach your method. You remember when we tafsir, for those who took the tafsir, we build the methodology to help us approach the Quran. Of course, the methodology from these scholars, not. So here the fuqaha, the mujtahideen, and in the quality of the ijtihad, there's two types of scholars. There's the scholars what we call al-mujtahid al-mutlaq wal-mujtahid al-muqayyid. Al-mujtahid al-mutlaq, the one who the mujtahid, non-restricted mujtahid. And there's the restricted mujtahid. So these four scholars that we have mentioned, they're not restricted. They didn't restrict themselves. They inspire, they learn from the school of thought, which is school of thought, which is mean like, not it has like, rules. No, they learn it, and it's like a kind of like a method of a style of how to talk, how to analyze, like we're talking about Sa'id ibn Musayyib and so on. So they weren't restricted. So they make their own principles. For example, the principle that we mentioned of Imam Ahmed said, I'll take this. If I have the hadith, I don't go farther. For example, you find in the medical school, they talk about the masalah al-mursala, talking about the istihsan. So it's more on analyzing, how can we help the people to have, fulfill their deen with the best of the maslahah possible, Because he said, no, I have this hadith. I said, but the Prophet ﷺ, if in this condition, he will help. So we are doing something good. We are not opposing or neglecting the hadith of the Prophet. Actually, we are inspiring from the teaching of the Prophet to help solve the situation that we have. Huh? Give you an example. Based on the contract, if you buy food, said how much for example, I need 2 pounds of this. How much? You say like $12. He said 3 pounds, you're gonna pay 18, and so on. So he's gonna weigh them, you take, and you give the money. This is the contract. Type one of the contract that is not accepted. You say how much this, there is a pile. How much this pile? So the seller, he look at the person, his appearance. This pile is $200. He said, what? This 200? He said, yes. Then another person said, how much the pile? He look at his appearance, like he say, give me $50 and take it. So this is not right contract, right? Why? Because he's fixing the price based on his mood or based on his, Now, how can we explain? So this is invalid, the contract, if you buy something without knowing the quantity or the description, because you're going to introduce here kind of, what we call ghubn. Al-ghubn, a type of cheating or unfairness. How can we then explain the buffet, open buffet? You pay, $10 or $20. You say, eat as much as you can. So according, if you put the contract, they said you are selling me something that I don't know the price or the description of it. So here, when we come to the question of the istihsan, saying there's a competition, this person, even with this, he's making money, and the customer is happy, and the person, he said, this is what, I want to do it, whatever he eat, I don't have any issue with it, However, when it takes to turn into something bad, that's when something, other thing. We're talking about the contract. So here you see how you change, sometimes some element into the ruling to make things easy for people, to make the possibilities of people to develop more their activities and everything. And this is actually mainly into the fiqh of al-mu'amalat in transactions. So this is the idea that we saying. So you see the differences. So for example, you might find, if we follow the hadith, this type of transaction is forbidden, because the hadith said so. For the Maliki school, they look farther, for example, like the example said, let's look at the benefit that, if we do such a thing, is going to help these people and so on. So you see the difference. Already we have a lot of differences, but differences is not going to cause division. Differences helping people, to implement at the best of their ability, inshallah, their deen. The other remark here, that observation, the usul that we've been studying, giving you a glimpse about them, these usul are not being, written by the imams. For example, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, my usul are 1, 2, 3. Imam Abu Hanifa said, my usul is Quran and this and this and this. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. No, they didn't do that. It's their student who, learning from them, they inspired their method, the way they do it, and then they put it into principles. So, for example, say, I know my Imam, when he does this. When there's a hadith, he does not go farther. So what the student said about the method that the Imam did, that is being then recorded as the principle of the school of thought. Therefore, we cannot be disputing, or arguing between brother or sisters on the differences of the principles. Say, no, this is the principle of the Shafi'i school. I will not accept it. I do this. I said, these principles are inspired from the method of the scholars, but it cannot be like, in a way to be cause for a division, or a way to be someone that will fight, to implement them or to force them as being the deen. Any question, John? Yes. No, two. Al-Muqayyad, the restricted. The restricted one, he had the level, the quality of a mujtahid, but he prefer, like our scholars, I'll give you some example, to make his ijtihad according to principles of one of the scholars. For example, Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he has the caliber of mujtahid. However, he chose to use the principles of the Hanbali school to be his usul. Therefore, he is Hanbali in usul, but mujtahid mutlaq in furu'. So he does not imitate whatever the school of thought Hanbali they say as opinion. No, that he make his own ijtihad. But his own ijtihad, he used the tools of the Hanbali school. So he will take the hadith. If there's no hadith, he will take the hadith mursal. If there's no hadith mursal, he will take this. He will not do the same system as, for example, medical school they do. However, he's, restricted himself to be within the principle of the Hanbali school. You have Al-Imam Al-Suyuti, rahimahullah. He's a mujtahid, but muqayyid, restricted where? With the principles of the Shafi'i school. Any question? You have the reference, the book, inshallah. If you go back to it, you'll have a summary of all what we've been doing. So I can show you here is the ethics of disagreement. And you have the removal of blame from the great imams by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. Also, it has many of what we have been saying. So here we can go very fast. So the removal of the blame on the noble imams. So you cannot blame them because they are different. That's what the books is about. But because the differences between them was a fact, was something, a necessary thing to happen. You see what I have said here. It should not be said that the hadith have all been documented and compiled, and therefore it is unlikely that they would have been unknown. This is because the well-known collections of hadith were compiled after the demise of imams who are followed, may Allah have mercy on them all. Also, it is not acceptable to claim that the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, are limited to those found in the specific collection of hadith. Moreover, even if this were to be the case, not everything in this collection will be known by a single scholar, and this is highly unlikely to be the case with any person. Indeed, it is possible that a scholar might possess a large number of collection of hadith and yet not be aware of all the hadith contained within them. So these, concerning the hadith. You go further, you find the second reason was also very common at the time of the first generation of Tabi'in and the second generation up to the time of the well-known imams, more so than the first generation. Indeed, it's more common than the first reason. Hadith were widespread by then and were known, but they reached many of the scholars through weak channels, even though they had reached others through comparatively authentic channels. So reaching through weak channel, they will not take it in consideration. Those who reach them with the strong channel, they're going to take it in consideration. So you see, so these are, facts. So this is what we're talking about, the hadith. Another reason is that the transmitter forgets that he related the hadith and is hence unable to remember it as a later date, or he actually denies that he ever related the hadith. Hence, one mujtahid might believe that this is a defect necessitating the abandonment of the hadith, whereas another mujtahid might believe that it is acceptable to cite that hadith. So I say at a certain age of that person, he will forget. So a mujtahid will say, as he forget, he might have forget all the hadith, so I will consider this narrator to be da'if. Others said, no, I will consider the first part of his teaching to be acceptable, the second part I will not, and so on. So there is a lot of reason leading to, and this is in the sources. A further reason is that many of Hijazi scholars hold the view that the Iraqi or Shami hadith should not be cited as an evidence unless it is originated in Hijaz. This is what I have told. To the point where some of them remarked, give the hadith of the people of Iraq the same status as the narration of the people of the book. Neither affirm them nor disbelieve them. So this is kind of harsh and excessive, And another Hijazi was asked, is the following chain of transmission authoritative? Sufyan from Mansur, from Ibrahim, from Alqama, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. The reply was, if it did not originate in Hijaz, then no, without even trying to check the narration. If it's not in Hijaz, so it is, because Hijaz, it has Medina, Mecca and Medina, that's it. So these how, the fifth reason that the hadith has reached the scholar, and its authenticity has been established to him, but he forgets the narration. This can occur with regard to the Quran and the Sunnah. For instance, there is the well-known hadith related on the authority of Umar, that he was asked about the person who is in a state of major ritual impurity but finds no water while he is traveling. Umar said he must not pray until he finds water. Ammar ibn Yasir, may Allah be pleased with him, then said, O commander of the faithful, do you not remember when you and I were herding camels and we were both in states of major ritual impurity, and I rolled in the dust and performed the prayer while you did not perform your prayer? And do you remember that I mentioned this to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he replied, it was enough for you to do it in this way. And then he struck the ground and he taught him the tayammum. Umar then said, O Ammar, fear Allah. So Ammar said, if you so wish, I will not narrate it. Upon which Umar remarked, we hold you responsible for what you claim. So Umar, he totally forget that. So you see, subhanallah, things, are facts. So when we think of the differences, we don't think of differences as like people are playing with the deen. The differences is a fact, is natural, is natural. However, the most important always, I'll repeat it, the differences does not touch the fundamental, the core, the creed. So you can, mashallah, go back to, there's is a short book, and talking mainly about the hadith, that it how it can be, the same hadith leading to differences, and why. Forgetfulness, conveyed or reached to the scholar with a chain weak of narration, the other with strong narration, and so on. The other book, this is what I've been reading from, The Ethic of Disagreement in Islam, and you can find all what we have been studying in summary. How you see? Methodology of Imam Malik. Go also Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Are close to the Shafi'i. This principle in order of priority are when evidence is available in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, he does not consult any other source, and so on. Methodology of Imam Dawud al-Zahiri, which I passed, Type. Now, the reasons of differences, they go back to three main points. Differences due to the diversion in the hadith distribution and or authentication. This is what we already have mentioned. So this is, we can compile under it all the reason that in the, mainly in the book of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, Raf' al-Mana. This type of the hadith, how it might, reach a person, not reach another, and so on. The second main difference is due to the understanding interpretation of the text. So, understanding the text, one of the main reasons goes back to the language itself. For example, there's words used in the Sharia, but in the language have different meaning for the same word. For example, ayn, 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 which is specific, the eye, right? Ayn. So, ayn is used for the eye. It used for the pure gold, they call ayn. It used to specify something. He said, Aynu shay, I mean this specifically, this thing. It is, a guardian, he said, have aynun alay, so they just watch the person. So this one word, it has different meaning. So which the meaning that you're going to be used to understand the implication or the content, the message within the ayah. Of course, there's words when they are used, it changes the whole meaning. Therefore, they take out of the context the whole ayah. So that's the word not to be used. So to understand the context, so to know which word or the meaning of that particular word that fit the context. So if we do not have any explanation or any kind of indication, then the word, it becomes like equal, the meaning if it has a different meaning. Example that the scholar they give. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. The divorcee ones, they should observe a waiting period of 3 quru'. Al-qar'u in Arabic has meanings, that share meaning between al-tuhru wal-haydu. Al-tuhru, state of purity, al-haydu, state of menses. So if you take one of them, so it's going to be calculated from the part where clean. If you take the other meaning, is the calculation start from the part when are in a state of menses, and this can make big difference. So the fuqaha, they have عدة المطلقة, so the waiting period is going to count it by the the cycle of the menses or the cycle of the cleanness. The people of Al-Hijaz, they want based on the cleanness, and Al-Iraqiyun, they base on the cycle of the hayd. And this is why there's fatwas associated to that. The talaq in time of menses, for those who say the waiting period need to be starting in cleanness, they will say the talaq only can happen in time of cleanliness. And that's why they call the other one, they call it when it's done in time of cycle of menses, that's called talaqun bid'i. And some of the scholars, they do not take it in consideration. And this comes from these differences into the word itself. There is others words that it might be taken, a figurative speech, or it can be, taken as a word that it means, For example, you say Asad. Asad is a lion. So when you say a person like Asad, it's a figure of speech to describe the strength of the person, how brave. But if you take a person Asad, like this person, he's like Asad, so his feature looks like Asad. So if I take the Asad in this sentence, sorry, as the meaning of the word itself. And here also there's different of interpretation. Huh? There is a difference, then leads to difference of interpretation. Some of the scholars, based on that, they said to not, being, alter the interpretation, we reject the majaz. So the figurative speech, we will not accept it to be in the Quran as a style to introduce it in our interpretation. When in the Arabic language, they use the metaphor and the figurative speech as part of their language, and the Quran was revealed in the Arabic. However, those who deny the majaz, they have also, a strong evidence, because they say the majaz, which is mean you can give wrong interpretation to the attributes of Allah through the way of the majaz. So you see, some people, some scholar, they keep you to be cautious, to not go, overboard, and the other, they give you open for you the horizon to dig more into the meaning of the Quran. And always, if we look at it from this perspective, the differences actually, it help one to be better, on the right path, and not limited with an open horizon to really dig more and to understand more. I'll give you an example and we'll finish with this, inshallah. We'll stop here today the class. The time is changing, so, and we have the salah. But I'll give you this example. I'll let you to think about it. And next week, inshallah, will be our last class, bi'idhnillah. And we wrap all this, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. If you have any question, please prepare them. We can tackle those questions. You have these two books if you want to review them. And if you have any question that require, for you to clarification, please do. Here in Surah Al-Ma'idah, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, this is Surah Al-Nisa, Surah Al-Ma'idah. Here. Allah talking about the wudu, which is good example because there's led to the differences between the Jumhur and the Hanafi school. Here. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, all you who believe, when you stand up to the prayer, wash your faces and your hands to the elbow, and wipe your head and your feet. Okay? So in this ayah, the and the wow here, where, this is and, where, what does it mean, where, in the Arabic language? So the where does obligate the sequence, or the where does obligate that you have to do all of this action? So do I have to start with my face and my hand and then my head and then the feet, or I can do the face first and then I do my feet and go back to the thing? Because the end for me is just I have to do them all. It's like you say, today, what did you do this morning? You said, oh, I went to the masjid and I went to the grocery and I want to do this and I want to this. So I understand that you did all, but not by obligation that you give them to me in order, right? So the understanding of the letter wow led to different interpretation. Led to scholars to say the sequence is an obligation. Others say, no, it's not an obligation. It's a sunnah, it's recommended. So if you start with your feet and you finish with your face, according to the Hanafi school, your wudu is accepted. If you do them in sequence, that's what we should do because that's the sunnah. But it's not an obligation, because the wow for us, it means that you have to do them, but does not obligate you to do the sequence. For other scholars said the wow in the language means sequence, so the sequence is an obligation. So this is an example that I want to share with you. And in the same here, ila al-marafiq, to the elbows. The big interpretation of the thing, of the scholars, is to the elbows before you get to the elbow, or include the elbow. It's both, right?
But the wiping, when it comes after wiping the head, comes the feet.
Yes.
So nowadays someone saying, hey, we should be wiping the feet
No, it's with the waghsilu. So wash the أيديكم المرافق وامسحوا وأرجلكم. You see, because وامسحوا برؤوسكم. So here وأرجلكم, if it was wife, say برؤوسكم وأرجلكم. So وأرجلكم goes back to the verb فاغسلوا. But actually there's another riwayah of qira'ah where they say أرجلكم, which is actually give you both the evidence for washing and the permission to wipe. Inshallah. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم. See you inshallah next time. Inshallah we'll go for the salah. بارك الله فيكم.